I conducted a survey. I was beginning my research on finance transformation. And I wanted to get a feel for what people were pushing for. Now, to give you a little background, I was the senior editor at CFO Magazine for many years, almost 20 years. And we spent an awful lot of time in the 90s and afterwards understanding financial process improvement and the drivers for it, why people were interested in it, when they were interested in it. It's very of keen interest, particularly after a financial crisis or a recession. That's not a coincidence at all. So I first started writing about this, worked with Greg Hackett, around the mid-1994 or 1995, when it was very much a kind of a novel idea to say, what are we looking for? What are we really spending on our finance organization? How much cost? How many people? How fast we're going? Are we spending too much? People are still asking that question today, and the spreads are still the same, okay? The best practice companies are still spending a quarter, 1/3 of what the laggards are spending to run their finance organizations. And we'll look at what are some of the drivers of that. But people told me they're certainly interested in efficiency, because it was always, why are we going to invest in more finance software if you're not going to show me a payback? But what I found here is people are very interested in effectiveness as well. And we'll get into a little bit of what that means. In a nutshell, I think it means make improvements that drive business value. Don't make improvements that just might make life easier on the accountants, okay? And these days, companies are not investing in finance unless they can very much align these improvements and these capital investments in providing business value. So I'll show you what we found. What are people focusing on? 8 out of 10 practically, planning, budgeting, forecasting, and a lot of the same obstacles that have held people back are still there. The lack of data definition commonality, the lack of systems integration, with companies constantly merging, spinning off units or whatever. It's always a moving target. But I found it interesting, and that's one of the reasons I asked Gabe to join us today. The second most popular area is the close to disclose process. So I thought we'd really focus in on those two things. Where did the word benchmarking come from? Well, it actually started with cobblers who used to have people put their feet up on a bench and they'd trace the size of their foot. Another way of looking at the word is it's in engineering, it's a reference point. And what it is identifying a standard of excellence, okay? Who closes their books in 10 days or less? Why is that a good thing? Well, speed is always good, but we'll prove and argue today that speed also can mean lower cost. And it also can have very important implications for your relationship with the street, obviously. So speed is important, but not in and of itself. So benchmarking is trying to understand how you compare to a peer group in terms of speed, cost efficiency, labor productivity, and we have ways of looking at dimensions, comparing peer groups by industry size, structure, so forth. So there's a difference between a benchmark, which is a measure, and then benchmarking is looking at those who are best practice and understanding how they do it. So benchmarking is comparing yourself to companies that you have reason to believe that really have it going on. So it's not just isolating the metric, it's understanding the why and the how. An informal definition, it's just understanding that you can be humble enough to admit that you can do better and that you want to get your people kind of acculturated to the idea that process management is not a one-off thing, but that it takes a continuous improvement mindset. So what are best practices? These are methods and techniques involving people, structure, technology, training, leadership, all the key enablers. These are processes and practices that have consistently shown to deliver effective results. It's funny, this is a funny kind of slide, but it is true. We found over the years that people do go through this kind of revelatory process of saying, we don't need to benchmark. We know we did pretty good. Or, you know, we had some attrition over the last couple years, and now we're able to do what we do without having to fill those positions. So we know we've become more efficient. We've whacked in some software. We're doing something a little bit better. You know, we don't really need to compare. But once you realize you do need to compare, because unless you're able to say with assurance where we stand, then you're just going in circles. But we find that people go through this kind of soul searching until they finally come around to the notion that there's something important here.